Right, morning everybody. Wait for a few more people to join us, and just as we do, I'm going to get started. Welcome to Strategy Café. Lovely to have everyone here today. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Alison, who's our guest leader this morning, and wonderful lady with a really interesting long-standing career as a lawyer and within the city, which she's going to tell us about. And we're going to be talking about that, about becoming a senior woman leader in the City of London in various different contexts, and her very varied and interesting career over the next half hour, and also digging into her involvement in sustainability within the city and the Livery Climate Action Group. And then when we are coming up towards the top of the hour, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the next Strategy Cafe that we're going to be doing. Got a really exciting series of these coming up. And we'll stay on until 10 past, quarter past, and open up the webinar to questions for Alison, for all of you. I'd like to just make a note that this is the first time that we've used this particular application. So we're using Zoom webinar this morning, a little bit different from usual. I'm not 100% familiar with it, so I may make the odd mistake. So forgive me if I do. I'll just pause and try and correct it if I do. One thing you'll notice, which is a little bit different, is that we can't see you, but we will be able to hear you at the end, which I think is probably overall a good thing, in that we are going to record this. And if you want me to turn the recording off for the Q&A at the end, so we can have a more sort of closed question session, just say, or if you'd like afterwards for a question that you've given us to be edited out before we put these on the podcast and on our YouTube channel, then again, please just say, and we can easily do that. So let's get going. So Alison, do you want to come off your mute? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. And good morning, anybody that's watching and listening.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Really, really lovely to have you. Just tell everyone a little bit about you, and then let's get into your interest in the city as a starting point.
Well, thanks very much, Nick. You've put a little slide up of some of the highlights. I mean, if we start at university, it's a sort of a bit of a starting point. I read law at Durham University. It's been a very important part of my life, my connections with my college, Van Mildert, and the University of Durham. And that led me directly into taking a training contract, which was then called Articles. I was an article clerk in the city at the law firm, which was then called Allsop Stevens, Bates & Co., fairly sort of medium-sized firm. But that then merged over the next 20 years or so to become one of the world's largest law firms now, DLA Piper. During my career, I specialised in real estate, commercial property work, and at the age of 30 became one of the first female partners in the city and the first female partner in my firm. Other highlights, as well as a sort of a commercial property law career at DLA Piper, I was very involved in founding the first women's network, and that's been a very flourishing part of our diversity network schemes. And I also was the training partner for our real estate group across Europe, which meant 300 real estate lawyers, which was really very exciting and engaging work. But the other parallel side, I suppose, to my career is getting involved in the City of London Corporation. And so in 1991, I stood for election on the Court of Common Council, which is the governing body of the city. I don't know quite how familiar everybody is. There's probably one or two over familiar and very many people not very familiar, but we can go into anything that's not very clear. But an elected member of the Court of Common Council, independent, not party political. And that was a 10-year stint. And then I was again re-elected, but this time to be an alderman, which is a slightly different role, but again elected. And then last year, I became a sheriff of the City of London. There are two sheriffs, and that job started in September, and it's just held for 1 year. So that's really where I am now. That's hence the alderman and sheriff sort of title to me.
Are you at the Old Bailey right now? Or are you in Mansion House, or are you somewhere else?
No, I'm actually at DLA Piper. To be honest, the Old Bailey, where traditionally sheriffs have an apartment where they can live. This year it's being refurbished. So, as a property lawyer, I should think that's great. We get our properties sorted out. So I'm not living there at the moment. I do have a judge's room as an office, but first of all, at this time in the morning, actually most of the prisoners are arriving, and there can be quite a bit of background noise of the prisoners arriving in the cells below me, and all the vans coming in and out, and the IT isn't quite as good as it is here at DLA Piper.
Yeah, it makes sense. So I mean, it's a very strange and old kind of tradition that the sheriff lives in the Old Bailey and is kind of in charge of the building there, but it's good that it's being refurbished. I understand. Is that fair?
Yes.
more comfortable living quarters for you.
Well, I think it was quite mouse and moth ridden, which wasn't great, and no heating in that bit of the building, so that bit definitely needed refurbishing.
This is a lovely photo. Looks like it's the Guildhall to me.
Yes.
Yeah, and maybe on the Roman Forum. Is that right?
The amphitheatre. The amphitheatre. Actually, the Roman Forum is over towards Leadenhall Market. This is the amphitheatre. And this was the election of the sheriffs. So in the middle, we've got the then Lord Mayor William Russell, the then two existing sheriffs, Michael Manelli and Chris Hayward. And then at the outside, in the duller robes, the violet-coloured robes, is myself and Nick Lyons, my co-sheriff. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So when we were chatting about coming on the podcast today, we had a really interesting alignment. My wife used to come up with her father to the Lord Mayor's show as a kid. And he was a NatWest banker in the city at the time. So she, really remembers fondly, being brought up as a child up to that. And he, there's a famous, there's still fragments or remnants of a bomb on the Old Bailey. So he walked past the Old Bailey on the day of the bomb. It was like 5 minutes past it. So there's sort of interesting sort of shared past. But I was just super fascinated that this was a big thing for you with your dad. Tell us a bit about how as a child the city was a thing for you.
Yes, it's strange. My father was a Methodist minister, which sort of meant traditionally you move around posts quite regularly, although he seemed to stay everywhere for about 7 years, so it wasn't that disjointed. But we came to Dartford in Kent when I was 11 and started at Dartford Grammar School, so it was a good point in my education. And my father just one Saturday said, "Oh, do you fancy going up to the Lord Mayor's show?" I mean, I don't know that I'd even actually heard of it then. I would probably have been about 12 or 13. And it was slightly out of character for him to even want to bother to go to London, but it was only a 30-minute train ride from Dartford. And in fact, Dartford, for me, Dartford was always tantalisingly on the edge of the city. The city was the draw, the big place to go to. So we went up literally on spec one Saturday morning. It was absolutely crowded. I remember we stood at Mansion House Station, and there were raised flower beds there. And certainly I'm such a short person, I had to be standing on the flower bed in order to see anything over the crowds. And the buzz, excitement, the floats were just, incredible. The marching bands, the military, everything to me sort of talked of possibility and sort of slightly quirkiness. But it wasn't an alien world. I didn't feel rejected by it. I felt I could be part of it. I don't think after that I then said that's what I'm going to do in life, because it was, some 40 years later that I actually, 30 years later rather, I actually got involved. But I think it was always in the back of my mind that this is a place that's exciting. The City of London is a place of possibilities.
I love that. City of London is a place of possibilities. So those of you who have joined us, you'll be able to see there's a chat area and a Q&A area. And one of the reasons we've gone for this application is that we can use that. So if you want to put questions in, or you want to just chat during the webinar, please do, and we should be able to see it, and I'll try and pick up questions as we go. One of the things we talk about in our work in transformation and change, again, this is a connection with my wife, who's a business partner and works with us in Alembic, is this idea that the patterns that we form in life somehow fate us. So although I pick up your kind of idea that maybe you didn't decide at that point to come back into the City of London, it's interesting that you had that sense of the vibrancy and its possibilities, and then, we're going to come onto it now, you're building careers. So I just wonder, whether unconsciously, you were always coming back. So we got this, which I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to this in a second. This is a photo I know of, a particular big property deal that you're involved in, which may be great context for talking about, your the legal side of things. And we've got some stuff up here about becoming a partner and about DLA Piper, and there's a little bit there about them, which is good opportunity just to promote DLA Piper here for a second. Everyone can see the slide. I'm going to drop the slide so people can see us a little bit better, but maybe we can just chat about this part of your life. So tell us about, how did you come back into the city, and, tell us about a little bit about, being a woman leader in a busy, cut and thrust corporate law firm. How did that all happen?
Yes, well, I mean, I said I didn't think about becoming, if you like, a member of the corporation when I saw the show, but I certainly always wanted to come back to work in the city, because I felt I wanted to be a lawyer from sort of around that time in my school career. Wanted to read law at university, so that all happened, and I luckily got a place as an article clerk, as I said. When you come into the firm, I wasn't the only woman trainee, so that was quite good, but it was clear all the partners were men. But I felt that if I worked hard, and I just thought, I suppose I was focused, I wanted to make a career, I had to, make my own way in terms of finding, something that was going to earn me money to live and find somewhere to progress. I just felt, it would come to me if I worked hard and did well and saw how things worked within the firm. And I wasn't the youngest partner ever made up, so clearly it wasn't sort of meteoric, but I was the first female partner. And to me, in a sense, it didn't really feel that strange, because I just felt it was me doing it. But I mean, it clearly was. There weren't many women partners in the law firms, in the city law firms at the time. So I think this was 1985. It made a difference really in terms of things, and I didn't want to be the first, frankly. I wanted it to open up for the future from there.
And were you were the first in your firm?
Absolutely the first in my firm, yeah, which was then a Liverpool London firm,
right?
And there were about 40 partners, I reckon. So I mean, it was a little bit daunting. It was like walking into a lion's den, if you like, going to partners meetings a little bit. But they were people I knew, so I didn't see it. They saw me as the only woman there, and I just saw me as me with a lot of people.
Yeah. And did you perceive glass ceiling? Was glass ceiling in your mind when this was going
Yes, it was. It wasn't. I wasn't unaware of that, but I didn't feel, that I could then sit back and do nothing. I suppose I always just continued and wanted to do better and better. And I suppose an element which maybe seemed to be a female trait of trying to prove yourself more than other people. So I didn't feel that I could say it's done and I just didn't need to bother anymore. I was always feeling that it was not precarious, because obviously as a partnership it's a commercial contract, but you just felt that you were always needing to make yourself known and make your presence there.
And I'm just curious about the politics. Not asking you to share anything you don't want to share, but just, most partnerships have got their heavy dose of politics amongst the senior partners. How did you find that, and what were the best ways that you learned to navigate politics?
Well, I was very lucky that I had a very good mentor, effectively. The person who'd actually interviewed me for the job, gave me the job as an article clerk, continued to promote me. Obviously, he was a man because he was a partner already. And I think that was helpful to build allies along the way. I mean, not everybody was going to like you and you weren't going to like everybody, but I think you needed to understand how people, perhaps perceived you, how you could work together, whether there was some shared goals. I mean, obviously the profitability of the partnership was important, but it was more in terms of maybe clients or jobs or roles or engagement in many ways. I think building those people together. I didn't get involved in the heavy politics. I didn't see my interest in actually staying in a sort of a managerial role, which was perhaps the next role up, is once you've become a partner and you've become a senior partner in your area of work, it's to go into management and go onto the board. And that didn't appeal to me. I'm afraid that did look far too political. And I felt that I wanted to stay in the legal system as a lawyer. But then, of course, I found, a total distraction to a certain extent by going into getting involved in the City of London Corporation. So that suited me in a better way, and that is obviously clearly not devoid of politics either. So then again, it's a sort of it's claiming allies along the way, you hope.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, City of London is more electoral, with more real politics, isn't it? I think DLA is probably, narrow politics, isn't it? It's the electorate is the partners of the partners, isn't it? Whereas in the City of London, it's real.
Yeah, I mean, it's not party politics on the whole. It certainly wasn't at that stage.
Yeah.
But yes, you're dealing with, and the people that elect you are real people with real problems, and you do have a position of power, because you seem to be the people that are deciding whether to do this with the money that's collected through the council taxes and whether to do something else. And you have both the overlay of the residential voters, but also the business constituents. And they're also, many of them interested in what is the Lord Mayor doing, what's the corporation doing about issues. We had the whole Brexit issue, we have, response to COVID now. We have, the future of the city, how we can regain its competitiveness. We are challenged on those issues by many of the people who we come into contact with as voters, or just in the business community generally.
Let's come back to that in a second. I want to come back to, so I think your choice of pathway is to stay, therefore, in what I call expert leadership. So, at the forefront of your field in commercial property law. And I always think, there's two different aspects, two really striking aspects of being a lawyer. So one is a deal maker, which is sparring with the other side and negotiating for your client, trying to get the best for them. And the other side that we see often, over the last decade or two, it's really sort of risen, is more the mediator. Trying to bring parties together and acting more, the mediator or the arbitrator. Now you're, I think, the battler, aren't you? Is that right? I got that right.
Well, I mean, in any transaction, it sort of goes through very, very many stages, doesn't it? I mean, you start wanting to do a deal together, and then at some stage during the transaction, your aims slightly diverge because either the money isn't right, or some other conditions don't work, or some other, spanner comes in the work, or a third party gets involved in some way. And so then you start to mediate to make sure you've got the deal still on course, really. And finally, you sign up, at which stage you hope you're not at daggers drawn anymore, but you're back to an engaging, good shake of hands that you feel you've done the right thing. I mean, I enjoy all that. Overnight deal doing and conversations can be a bit grueling, and I didn't do them every week. But on the other hand, I quite enjoyed that gamesmanship of working out what everybody wants from the deal, because if people start off thinking you've got a heads of terms that are agreed, and then suddenly it all diverges, you need to work out why, what's gone wrong, what's happened, why is were they not in fact honest in the first place, or has something changed on your part. I mean, my clients weren't always as straight as the deal is done, that they will have variations that come through, and you have to guide that path as their lawyer, because you have your own sort of standards and professional requirements that you want to stay by and stand by. And that's part of the sort of, the standing you have in the profession generally. If you're known to be if you like, a lawyer that just wavers and doesn't actually stick to at least a transparent honesty about things, so that can also weigh against you in a future deal.
I think that's super interesting. And so you bring all of that experience of, I guess, the resourcefulness of the professionalism, which includes the expertise and experience and detail of being a lawyer, and going through, I've done many of these and desperately want a great lawyer on your side to sort of go through all of the detail and make sure nothing is missed once you get to sort of, trying to complete that transaction. But the thing I also found super interesting about you, and it's fundamental to success at the end, there's always kind of like these pinch points towards the end of all of this process, is the human dynamic. And understand, I always think in our clients and situations, quite often people start off by just being defensive and thinking about themselves. In the first opening up of the deal, it's when somebody on one side starts to think about the need of the other side. And then particularly what's the hidden need, that we, sometimes this is called the black swan of the deal. So what's the unexpected hidden need that, provides you some opportunity, some leverage. So tell us a little bit about human dynamic, and because I think you loved that.
Yes, I do, because I think one of the reasons I liked and wanted to go into the real estate world and the commercial property world is that I like the people in it. I mean, they weren't all nice people, and you often feel that commercial developers and people like that can be very sharp in their behavior, but actually I found them engaging and interesting, wanting to make a deal, but actually there was a great human side to them as well, and you sort of either get on with them or you don't get on with them, and I did, and I felt it helped me to work with people that I sort of understood and got on with them. I could represent them as a client in the legal profession, in the legal work, and then again when you met other people's clients, you'd either get on or not, but actually what you needed to see and to understand is what their drivers were, and how these things impacted on the transaction you were trying to nail for that day.
And was there any really important technique or lesson for gaining that leverage, that secret information, that understanding of the other side's needs?
I suppose a little bit trying to be reflective on things. I mean, because the deals can move so quickly, and you can be very, totally focused on them, and then other things will happen, and you'll sort of forget what you were doing with the first deal because something else just completely threw you off the rails during the day or something. I think it's just being reflective on what's going on, taking stock, calling the team in, if you like, and saying, look, where are we? What's gone on? Where are things happening? And just trying to just assess where we are, and just really then think, what are the red lines? What are our red lines? What are the clients no-go areas? What's the bare minimum, and what can we just ditch as giving in, not giving in, but what can we concede to the other side so as to make sure that we get exactly what we want without losing anything that is not really relevant to us. So I think just reflecting and recalculating, because you can often get so hooked in that you just don't actually reassess what the deal is all about. You just think you've got to win it at all costs.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to just say, where are we going? What are we going to do? Do we want to do the deal? Let's start all over again from almost basics, and then work through how that's going to be able to be effective in the transaction.
What was it about this one? The WRWA?
Yes. So the WRWA is the Western Riverside Waste Authority.
Right.
So it's actually amalgam of sort of Western borough. When I say Western boroughs, I mean Wandsworth, Hammersmith, and Fulham. Oh gosh, it's about 10 or 15 years ago I did this deal, but it's a sort of iconic deal because this site that we've got here is their site on the river, down in Wandsworth at Smugglers Wharf, and it's now very much surrounded by all the Thames Tideway works. But this is where the waste comes down the river in barges. Gets dumped into this big sort of a warehouse there, gets sorted out, or stuff comes from the road and goes on the barges and goes off down the river. So it was these local authorities together trying to outsource their waste disposal. And what I liked about it is, first of all, that as a lawyer, you get so involved with the client's business. I wouldn't have known anything about waste disposal, but I now understand, if you like, the whole process of what works. So you have to understand their business in order to understand what it is that's driving the transaction here.
Yeah.
And that was very interesting. And now, because of my sustainability interests, that understanding of waste and waste disposal, then there was obviously a lot of landfill. Now there's a lot of recycling and also energy from waste. They have an energy from waste facility, Corey, down at Belvedere, which I was also involved in as part of this deal. And I think what was interesting is all these local authorities, so they had to agree, and then they had to agree with the provider of the waste services. So it was sort of quite innovative in terms of the local authorities outsourcing and then finding the right transaction with this external private company. And then also all these sites where people were living next door, they didn't want waste disposal right there, and there was the whole thing about trucks coming in and out and residents. So there was at every level there was a sort of a little issue. And then finally you have to have the blessing from the minister for the whole deal. So then you had to wait for the ministers to sort of agree. So even when we got the deal done, there was a final straw which was totally outside of our control to agree it.
So interesting. So it's totemic in terms of what it does for London. It's complex because it's got council and private interests, and it's political in the end. It's significant enough to need ministerial sign-off. It's a fascinating time in the kind of the evolution of how local councils work in partnership with the local business community much more. So super interesting transaction. I want to take us on to climate and climate action. Now, we have talked a little bit about the city, so given the time, I think I'm going to move past to this group. And just a marker for the session, we're interviewing Alison Gowman this morning, who's an alderman and Sheriff of London, heavily involved in the City of London Corporation, and had a career, which we've just been discussing really interestingly, as a senior equity partner at DLA Piper in commercial property, but has had a huge interest in sustainability. We met through my livery company, just coming into connection with Alison through the Livery Climate Action Group. Now, I'm going to kind of start this by saying, whether we like it or not, each one of us is currently in climate change transition. And we may not be actively in climate change transition, but we are, because society is in it. And many, many, many businesses and people are taking steps and taking action out there now. So there's a kind of a wave of stuff happening, actions as opposed to worries. The worries are all there, but the actions are starting. And that I find fascinating. And I think you've been leading on that for a long time. So tell us a little bit about your interest in this, and let's talk about what's happening in Livery Climate Action.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I've had an interest for a long time, obviously with the corporation's own footprint. They own 6,000 buildings across their whole of their portfolio, from the Guildhall to a sort of, a shepherd's hut on Epping Forest. There's a lot about climate issues that affect a big organisation like the corporation. So I drove through their issues around measuring energy and trying to get them involved in sustainability. It sort of slightly stumbled. I mean, I got a subcommittee set up and then they decided, we're doing it anyway. So it sort of got abandoned in the mid-2010s, 2015. And then it revived again because suddenly actually climate was a big issue. And last year, the corporation set its own climate action strategy. And part of that was to make sure that everybody in the square mile is also promoting that they should also be net zero by 2040. And so I've been doing quite a lot of engagement with all the various constituencies, one of whom is the livery companies, 110 organisations, some of whom have large property portfolios, some of whom have no property. Everybody's got investments of one kind or another. So there's all areas where we can actually engage with the transition and actually challenge ourselves as to what we can do to reach net zero by a date to be determined, but at least 2040 as far as the city corporation are concerned.
Amazing. We were chatting about this prior to COP26, and it's very interesting. I think I came to one of your sessions where you just heard about Mark Carney's initiative and we heard about all of that. So just tell everyone a little bit about that, about the transition finance. And
so the city corporation set up something called the Green Finance Institute, and it has been going now for 3 years. And it is absolutely amazing how, with the corporation's backing initially and with Treasury and BEIS, the government, but now very much supported by so many endowments and businesses, to actually be the hub, the go-to place for green finance, building, the whole community. And Mark Carney is very involved in this. He was the COP ambassador, the UN representative and the UK representative. And he, inevitably from his own background, has seen how private finance is the key to the transition, funding the transition. And the Green Finance Institute have been working alongside Mark Carney and the corporation, and all of the trillions of dollars that have been pledged to actually fund the transition. And the Institute has been looking at various areas where it can particularly give guidance. So the 2 or 3 initiatives, one is the Coalition for Energy Efficient Buildings, looking at what the barriers are to getting houses greened, working with the businesses, the finance organisations. We've also been doing a lot of work on decarbonising transport and setting up the GFI Hive, which is actually a hub looking at how you can fund nature-based solutions. I mean, I'm a non-exec director of GFI. There's a lot on their website if you want to have a look, and it's basically grown in strength and stature as to what it can say and do about this whole transition through private finance.
One of the big topics I think at the moment is ESG, and actually voting with your money. So the big funds starting to vote for companies that are very actively engaged in transition.
Yeah.
And withdrawing funds from companies that are not. And I do hear different voices on this. So some economists saying ESG is really just a sales tool for funds to try and attract people into a different subsector of the funds, rather than getting, well, they maybe should get, this is not a sales pitch and I'm not a financial advisor, but perhaps, a low cost index tracker instead. And one of the voices is actually you should invest in companies and then go to their meetings and then be difficult and then use your investment vote to ask for them to change things. Do you and the city have a view on ESG and how you feel about it?
Well, the City Corporation does have significant funds, not least in a charitable fund, the Bridge House Estates, and we're crafting our investment strategy at the moment. I mean, I don't think that the City Corporation would be probably known as an activist investor, but certainly we are crafting a very, very credible plan as to how we're going to get to net zero with our investments. Obviously, ESG is about more than just net zero. It's about social and governance. And the City Corporation also has, huge commitment and policies to the social and governance areas as well. I mean, I don't think disinvesting is the best way to do it, but I think, as you said, engaging, working together, whether it's both collaboratively or in a more sort of strategic and aggressive way, because that's how some people like to do it. I think that is the way. We don't need to have ESG as something special. It should be, in fact, the prism to all our investments all the time. In the way we're working, we need to look at how we have an impact on all of these things that are so critical to the future of our human race on this planet.
And just tell us a little bit about, what you're actually seeing. So, the livery is very interesting, ancient and modern, active, and more fellowship orientated in terms of their trades. There are very current companies, there are still the most ancient of companies where the trades don't really exist in the same way anymore. But they do bring together business people, active and retired, and thousands of businesses, big, medium-sized and tiny. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I'm most excited about that, which is that the impact the livery can have on the trades, professions and crafts that they're involved with. Yeah. So in October, I took part in a seminar, a whole day seminar that the air pilots and the scientific instrument makers, two different livery companies, put on about green aviation. And their power was to bring several aircraft companies to the table, bring the Minister of Transport on aviation there. So we had a really interactive engagement on the whole issue around green aviation. And, that's still a project that's ongoing. I had a meeting about it last week. So that's the livery company bringing together so many different diverse people. And there are other groups. The fuelers are very much working in the renewable energy and hydrogen space. Again, lots of seminars going on about these topics, which I think, livery companies would not have been doing 3 or 4 years ago, whether it's the impact of Zoom meetings during COVID that's actually caused people to have more serious conversations. I don't know. But you're absolutely right. The livery companies are sort of a portal through to so many businesses and organizations. We've got the Pan Livery Food Group, or the foodie livery companies, looking at what sustainable food, sustainable eating, healthy eating is looking like, and producing some guidance on that as well.
Amazing. Thank you very much for talking to us. Today, we've been interviewing Alison Gowman, Alderman and Sheriff of London, and a leading light in the Livery Climate Action Group, about her career as a senior female partner in commercial property law in the city, and her career in the City of London Corporation, and about how the livery companies are taking steps to help thousands of businesses transition for climate change. It's been a super interesting session, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Take a look at our free resilience course. It's available on our Learn World site. It's free of charge, and we've made it available to everybody to help everyone fill up their energy battery Please find it and share it if you think this would be interesting for you or for anyone in your team or your colleagues or your family. It's a great little program. So thank you very much for listening today. I hope you really enjoyed the Strategy Cafe with Alison, and check in next time for our next session, which will be on transformation and is going to be advertised on the Alembic website. The address is just here.